Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to these weekly sessions that we normally gather around with Dr. Admire Mari and a few more academics who normally join us from time to time to discuss methodology as a way of trying to help master's students as well as doctoral students, even those who are also busy writing their research articles, and we hope you are going to benefit. So we are running through something that we have done before. It's a discussion around problem statement formulation. I think in my experience over the number of years where I have supervised masters and doctoral students, many people often struggle to formulate problem statements, and that's really a challenge. And if you don't have a problem statement, then there is no research to talk about. I think, I don't know whether Dr. Mari remembers this. I think it was in the last seminar for the master's and PhD defense, where someone was saying, your problem is you don't have a research problem. So it shows how problematic things can be if our research problem are not research problems, and if our research problems are not really that strong and organ. So in our discussion this afternoon, we would like to just zero in on the issue of problem statement and then see how it can help. So I often say this to my students, that it's your responsibility as a researcher that you need to identify a research problem for yourself, and I often prefer to call it a burden of proof. You have to prove to me that this research problem exists and you have identified it. And once you have identified your problem, then you should be able to write about this problem. And you should be able to give us what a statement of problem is. And in this statement, you don't need to go in circles. You don't need to go to meander and all that. I need this. Many examiners need this to be very clear. They need it to be very concise. They need it to be very concrete. And these are some of the pointers that you should be thinking about when you are coming up with your problem statement. In this problem statement, I expect to read, your supervisors expect to read, what is the context? So, and when I'm talking about context, I am asking, what exactly do we already know about this? So you would have your topic. Let's say my topic is about cryptocurrency. My topic is about online learning. I expect my students to give me the context of the problem. What is it that we know at the moment about cryptocurrency, about online learning? What do we already know? So you should be someone who would have read things in order for you to be in a position to articulate what exactly do we know for now. Because if you are able to articulate this, you will now be able to tell us what perhaps we should be knowing that we don't know yet, what else we should be doing that we have not done yet. So there is need for you to put the problem into context. So identifying your problem is one thing. Putting the problem into context is a very big step towards formulation of a good research problem. You also need to make sure that you describe the issue, and you describe it in such a way that it's so precise. What is the issue about this research? What exactly are you addressing about online learning? What exactly are you addressing about cryptocurrency? What exactly are you addressing about health literacy? Depending on whatever area you are writing about. So you in the first instance, you would have put us in a space where you have told us what do we already know briefly, and you are now moving us to what we should be knowing or what we need to know. So you are now describing the situation, you are now describing the issue at hand precisely. And it's very important that in your problem statement, you are able to show the relevance of the problem. And in other words, I always say you need to show to me that this problem exists. It doesn't have to be a problem that exists in your mind. I need you to show the reader and the audience that this problem exists and this problem is relevant. Why do we need to know it? And then you will be able now to set your objectives. If you have been following our discussions over the last 2 months, we were talking about that these things, they really need to speak to one another. So you can't come up with the research objectives if the problem statement is not identified, is not contextualized, is not precise. You have not stated to the audience why it should be relevant. So it's very important for people to do that. So I will leave Dr. Murray to articulate. These issues that I'm talking about are the issues that probably we need to zero in down today, and then we discuss about these and see how best we can help each other. Dr. Murray.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Uwoyo. So basically, as you've pointed out, I think what comes out from the discussion is that if ever you're going to do a study, a thesis, a dissertation, or a mini thesis, at the heart of it all is the problem statement or the statement of the problem. That is the key. And any person who is going to read or examine your study will always start from that perspective to say, what is the problem statement? And whatever then comes in terms of the methods that you're going to do or use to actually address that statement of the problem must come from that particular problem statement. Otherwise, if you don't have a problem statement, you don't have a thesis, or you don't have a study to start with. There is nothing that you have. So it's always very important to always think about it and say, what is the problem statement in relation to my study? And what is it that has been written about? What is it that we know already? And what is it that we don't know? And how do we know about that which we don't know? That's where you can then flesh out your statement of the problem to say, this is the problem right now based on a literature review or a conceptual analysis of what is really happening. This is something that has not been talked about. This is something that has not been researched about, but it is a problem because if we don't know it, it means we are not going to be able to solve a particular thing. So you always start from the problem so that you can be able to offer a solution. And again, as I've already pointed out, we are saying, at the level of problem of the statement, this is the place where most examiners and even your supervisors go to first to understand and to assess the merits of your proposal or even a dissertation. So for us to understand whether your research makes sense, it's always very important for us to read thoroughly your problem of the statement to understand the whole research journey that you're going to undertake. Otherwise, if we don't understand the problem statement, it's likely that we are not going to be able to understand what your study is all about. So it's always very important, even as you go about writing your proposal or even writing a thesis, that you think critically about this thing which we call the problem statement, so that you can make it very clear for your reader to understand why is it that you're doing this particular study. And then you can be able to convince us of the importance of that particular study. Otherwise, if you don't do that, it becomes very difficult for us to understand why is it significant that your study should be done? Why is it important now? And why not any other field that you could have looked at? So it's always very important from our own point of view to make sure that you focus more on the problem statement, so that once you can get the problem statement right, it becomes very easy for you to then put other pillars of your study into perspective. So as we are already pointing out, the key here is to say what the so what question. So the problem statement can be able to tease out what we call the so what question that is at the center of any study. So if you don't give us the so what question, then your study is almost like a wishy-washy project, because it doesn't have any anchor that allows it to stand, and it doesn't have any ground that it has, so that it can be able to be meaningful, even make any empirical contribution, or any methodological contribution, even any sense to any reader who wants to understand exactly what you are looking at. So it's very important that that's why I think we have gone back to this thing which we call the problem statement, so that you can be able to understand what is it that is at the center of this thing that we are talking about today. I think you can proceed to the next slide, Dr. Woyo.
Okay, so in essence, we are saying in your problem statement, like what I said earlier on, you must prove that the problem exists. So there is a lot of work to do there, especially even at master's level. I really want people to prove that this problem they are talking about, it does exist. And when you do this proving, you need to give some evidence that supports the existence of the problem. So you can't just simply say online learning has caused digital divide. Where is the evidence? We understand it has caused that, but research is all about making things factual and making a contribution out there. So if we are saying it causes a digital divide, you need to show me how many people have been left out, how many people have been thrown out of the system by online learning. So there should be evidence that supports the existence of the problem you are talking about. And there should be evidence of this kind of a trend. So if it's a once-off thing, I can dismiss that and say, okay, maybe it just happened once there, and is it still a problem? And this is the point where I usually say, when you are citing your literature in the problem statement, can I get the latest one, 2018, 2019, 2020? If you give me a 2012 source in support of the evidence, I would now ask you what happened in the 8 years. Perhaps if researchers are no longer writing about this, then it means this problem has actually been solved. So you provide evidence at two levels. So I need the evidence, and you need to take the evidence and show me and the reader particularly that this evidence actually has got a trend. He has got a trend in it, and you are capable of showing the trend that in this year this is what happened. Furthermore, this is what happened, and all that. So it's very critical that these things appears in the problem statement. Specifically, I need this kind of detail for more for the doctoral degrees, that they should be able to show this. And you must be in a position to clearly describe this. So this is a reiteration of what I first said. There should be a clear description of the setting, and you should be able to even identify the causes that are related to this problem. And then you need to make sure that this statement you are talking about is feasible. But here is the problem. The problem is most of the times people don't have most relevant research to support their claim. And if you don't have that, then there is a problem. So the research problem in its very nature, we are looking at an area of conflict. We are looking at an area of concern. We are looking at an area of controversy. And by this, we are simply saying there should be a gap between what is wanted and what is currently being observed. There should be a gap between what is wanted and what is currently being observed. Then in that kind of space, we should be in a position to come up with the problem statement. Maybe Dr. Mare, you can come in, or I should talk about this, then you come in after this.
Let me come in, it's fine.
Okay, all right.
So we want to look at why is it important that we be able to deal with this thing which we call a problem statement? Why is it important? Because as we have already pointed out, this is at the heart, this is at the crux of any research project or any study that you can think of. Number one, the reason why we usually focus more on the problem statement is that it allows us to identify and to explain the problem in a concise but detailed way to give the reader a comprehensive view of what's going on. So essentially, even somebody who may not be in your context may be able to come in and understand your study better through, how you are going to be able to interpret and express yourself through the problem statement. So it's very important because it allows you to say it in a very concise but precise way to say what exactly is it that you are looking at. And through a problem statement, you can also be able to contextualize yourself within the debates that are happening in that particular area. Let's say, for example, you are dealing with issues around e-learning right now. So there are so many debates that are happening. Some are saying e-learning is actually further, allowing the digital divide to continue. Some are saying it's actually allowing those people who could not be part and parcel of the education project to come into the classroom, and all these other things. So all these debates. But then, if you find that based on research that has already been done, there is a gap or there is a problem that is actually going on, you can then be able to bring all these debates and then demonstrate to us that despite all these debates that are going on, there is a problem in the sense that A, B, C, D is happening. For example, maybe the marginalized are further being marginalized as a result of their lack of access to digital equipment, but also lack of access and also even issues around affordability of the data, that kind of thing. So all that must also be spoken about and discussed at length through your statement of the problem. So that is why a problem statement is very important. But another reason why it is also important is the fact that it also allows us to clarify what are the expected outcomes, in terms of establishing what are the desired situation would look like and how it would help us to provide an overarching idea about that particular project. But also it also allows us to understand then the solution and the scope in terms of what then needs to be done. So it's always very important to be able to zero in on your problem statement, so that even when you go about doing your study, we know that your study is pretty much about filling that gap, is about answering the problem statement, is about making sure that we know more about that problem that you have talked about in the problem statement. So the whole journey from your chapter 1 to chapter 5 or chapter 6 then becomes the journey whereby you are demonstrating how that particular problem statement that we identified can actually be filled, and how can we be able to understand that particular problem better, and what are the solutions and what are the problems in terms of understanding what can then be done in that particular environment. So it's very important that you clearly map out your problem statement so that you can be able to have parameters through which which are going to help you to as you go about doing your study.
Okay, so the next issue comes in where we are talking about when should you write this statement. So in academic research, writing a problem statement actually helps you to contextualize what the study is all about, what we should know and what we are not knowing. And it also helps you to understand the significance of your research problem. So it depends from university to university. It can be several paragraphs long, and its purpose is to serve as the basis for your research proposal. And it can be a few sentences in the introduction if you are writing a research article. So the problem statement actually looks different depending on what you are dealing with, whether it's a practical real-world problem or a theoretical scientific issue. So like I said earlier on, we want to go through how we need to do some of these things. So when we talk about contextualizing the problem, we are looking at, you should frame your research problem in a particular context. So that you give some background on what is already known about it. It's very important for people to do that. What is it that we know about this? So if you are looking at a practical research problem, so in terms of a practical research problem, this is perhaps what you could focus on when you come up with this statement of the problem, you should focus about where does the problem arise? Where does this problem arise? When does it arise? So it's important that we have an understanding, where does this problem arise? When does it arise? Who are the people it affects? So if you are looking at online learning at a practical problem level, we need to know, where does this problem arise? When did it arise? Did it arise as a result of COVID-19, or it was forever there? That information needs to come out very clearly. Who does it affect? Does it affect only the students? Does it affect the lecturers as well? Does it affect the teachers? Who exactly is affected by this problem you are talking about? Then you need also to go on to articulate aspects about what attempts have been made to solve the problem. Remember, you are not the only one to deal with this problem. So it means someone else has done similar research, and it's quite important for researchers to articulate and acknowledge what was done, and probably show the weakness of what was done earlier, so that yours can get context, because this is what is important. Your current study should have context. Otherwise, we don't have any reason to listen to you if you have not properly contextualized, and if you have not properly stated why we should be going the way you are proposing, and why we should not be taking what is available. Then in terms of the theoretical research problem, which I think most of the people here online are doing. So in this theoretical research, you need to think about scientific research. You need to think about social research, social, geographical, and even historical background around all those kind of things. And then you start to establish what is already known about the problem, because this is very important. And for me, context matters, because sometimes you can be dismissed that your problem is perhaps over-researched. Your problem has reached the saturation. People who have actually wrote about that have actually saturated the space. So it's actually important that you clarify what is already known about the problem. Then you go on to indicate whether the problem is limited to a certain time period. Is it a problem that was only an issue of discussion in the 90s, in the 80s, or in the early 2000s, and people were quiet about it? Or is it a discussion that has been dominated by the global South? And is it a discussion that has been dominated by the global North, and all that? Then after indicating, or after discussing this, you need to go further and talk about how has this problem been defined, especially when you look at research papers, research articles. How did earlier or previous scholars define this problem? What exactly did they debate about in the literature? So you need reference of that kind of magnitude in order to contextualize your problem. And in my years of experience, this is what I found to be a common challenge, a common pitfall. People tend to define the problem based on the solution, and in that space, you are actually putting the cart before the horse. You are defined. Don't ever try to define the problem based on the solution. You are shooting yourself in the foot. And most of the times when I give comments, I would say, if you know the solution, don't waste time and do this research. Just implement the solution you are doing, you are proposing in your problem statement. Dr. Mare, on contextualization of the problem.
Okay, so essentially what we are saying is that it's very important that you make sure that if it's a theoretical problem, make sure that you always use all the scientific or social or geographical and historical background that you may be able to have access to, so that we may be able to understand what is already known about that particular problem. Because remember, some of these problems, especially theoretical ones, have already been theorized some way, or maybe in a different context, but you need to bring that, that theorization that happened somewhere and bringing it into your own context to say, then how can we understand this particular problem within our own context? So it's always very important that you try and make sure that in as much as the problem is actually happening
I don't know, maybe I lost
at a
you.
local level, but also on the global level, they are already to understand. It's always very important to understand how exactly this thing can actually be defined and also debated in particular context. But also, it's also very important that you bring in literature that is already there so that it can also give you a better understanding of how that problem has actually been dealt with. For example, right now we are talking about the issue of online learning, as a problem. Yes, COVID-19 is probably just, exacerbated or accentuated or even amplified this problem, if we want to use those terms. But otherwise, it has always been there as a problem. But now it manifests itself in many other ways because of how, as a result of COVID-19, there are several challenges that are coming. So it's about making sure that, yes, we understand this problem is actually been amplified by this thing. But again, it has always been a problem because whenever ICTs are used to replace face-to-face learning, these are some of the challenges that have always been associated with that particular thing. Issues around digital divide, issues around lack of access, lack of affordability, and all these things. So it's always very important to then situate that within the broader debate that has already been happening, but at a theoretical, but also even at an empirical level, so that you can be able to demonstrate exactly why that particular problem is worth researching and why it's a worthwhile study to pursue at this point in time, either at a master's level or at a PhD level. You can proceed, Dr. Warren.
Okay, so another issue that needs to be done when we are formulating problem statements is to show why it matters. Why is the problem matters, and why is this research matters? So your problem statement should address the relevance of the research. Why is it important that this problem needs solution? Why is it important that this research needs to go ahead? So this does not mean that you have to do something which is groundbreaking or which is world changing. No, we are not talking about that. We are not also expecting you to become a Nobel Prize winner in your research, but we are simply saying that the study you are doing should be relevant, and it is very important that the problem you are talking about at the moment, we should be in a position to solve it. So it's actually very important for you as a student, for you as a researcher, to make sure that the problem you are looking at is researchable. It's actually feasible, and you are able to. It is important that we address this particular problem. Maybe it helps practice, it helps society, and all that. But there should be some element of justification in why we are doing all this. So depending on those who are doing applied research and those who are doing theoretical, all these aspects, they need to come out clearly. So if you are looking at practical research problems, for example, this is research that is relevant to a specific problem that affects your organization, affects your institution, affects the society, affects a social group, and all that. So to make it very clear why your research problem matters, you can ask yourself these questions. What will happen if the problem is not solved? Is the situation going to be bad? Is the situation going to be terrible? Is the situation going to remain the same? So the answer to this, it will tell you whether this problem matters or it doesn't matter. Who is going to feel the consequences if this problem is not solved? And the answer to this is also going to help you to figure out whether this problem you're talking about matters or not. So does the problem have a wider relevance, right? This problem we are talking about, does it have a wider relevance? I'm sure at the level of masters and doctoral students, the problem we will be dealing with, it should have a wider relevance in terms of the issues that needs to be addressed. For instance, we are looking at similar issues found in other contexts. Is it purely a Namibian problem? Is it purely a problem that you can easily find in global South countries? I'm sure digital divide is a problem of many countries in Africa, especially with this e-learning and the rest of the stuff. Then those of you who are doing theoretical, these are the issues that you need to think about. Sometimes theoretical issues have clear practical consequences, but sometimes their relevance is less immediately obvious compared to those of you who are doing applied research or practical research. So to identify whether your problem, whether in your theoretical space is actually important, you need to ask yourself this: how will solving this problem advance the understanding of the topic? This is very crucial, right? In a study that we were doing, I think since 2016 and all that, we were trying to put in a narrative to say that it's really very important for people to have an understanding. Why do people continue to visit countries that are politically unstable? Because our thinking was there is not so much literature that can help us to understand a loyalty of people visiting these kind of destinations, these kind of countries. So even in your research, especially at doctoral level, it's very important to know whether your problem you are trying to solve is going to advance, is going to improve the way we understand things at the moment, is going to advance the understanding in the discipline, is going to advance the way we reflect on certain things. You also need to reflect about what benefits is your current study going to have on future researchers. If I want to do a rejoinder to what you have done for your doctoral study, what benefit do I get from you? What benefit do I get from the research that you are doing? And does the problem you are working on, does it have direct or indirect consequences on society? Dr. Mare, please come in here and share your insights.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. So I think you have just explained it in the right kind of way. But I just wanted to add that at a theoretical level, despite the fact that you need to be able to advance the knowledge in terms of that particular area, the other issue is also to make sure that whatever you are going to contribute can also be used to explain social phenomena even in other contexts. For example, as Dr. Woyo was saying, for example, why is it that tourists continue to come to politically volatile countries or politically unstable countries? Why is it that they continue to visit those countries? And if you want to understand that, it can actually then be able to help us not only to understand probably African countries, but also even to understand why is it that people, for example, visit countries like the countries like South Sudan, where right now they still very unstable, for example. Why is it that we can be able to use that same research to understand why is it that people visit countries like Iraq or Syria, which are embroiled in all kinds of conflicts, even the war between Palestine and Israel. Again, why is it that people continue to go to Israel despite the volatility that we see in that particular? So his research in that regard, at a theoretical level, it can actually be used by somebody in Israel to understand why is it that people continue to come and visit that particular place despite the political volatility in that particular area. And I just wanted to give you another example. There's a research that I've just recently finished, and we're doing a research around internet shutdowns in Africa. And essentially what we wanted to understand is that why is it that countries that in countries where government actually owns internet service providers or telecommunication company, why is it easier for them to actually do internet shutdowns? Essentially what comes to the mind in terms of that particular study is that because government owns these particular companies, it becomes easier for them to control and also to control, not only to control but also to manipulate managers in those particular companies by just saying that if you don't do what we want you to do, we can then always replace you, or we can always do whatever we want. But also in that particular research, we also wanted to understand why is it that even private companies that are not owned by government, why is it that they continue to shut down internet services during times of crisis, what pushes them to do that kind of that kind of thing. So if you use that kind of knowledge, it can actually be used, that knowledge at a theoretical level. It can actually be used to understand why is it that even in countries where government doesn't even own a telecommunication industry, or even a telecommunication company, why is it that we still see internet shutdowns? What kind of levers of power that the government have, or what kind of influence that the government have in that particular ecosystem that allows it to be able to shut down the internet? So at a theoretical level, a problem can actually be able to contribute at a theoretical level, but even at an empirical level in terms of understanding why certain things actually happen the way they happen and not the other way around. So it's very important to always think about it, especially if you're dealing at a doctoral level, but even sometimes even at a master's level, if you want to do groundbreaking research, it's also very important to look at that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mari. So in order to show you why it matters, these are some quick guidelines that you can also use. Try to read the opening paragraphs of existing studies for one or more of the following. If you read that, it is going to be very important for you in order to establish this. So when you read articles, try to identify what is the issue the article is trying to talk about. What is the problem? So reading opening paragraphs of existing studies will help you to identify these issues. What is the issue? What is the problem? It also helps you to find out what is the controversy that has led to the need for this study. I think towards the end, I'll be able to show you this from our own studies that we have done. What concern is being addressed behind the study? Is there a sentence such as the problem being addressed in this study is, or the purpose of this study is to do this? It helps you to identify what the problem it was dealing with. So if you know you have identified all this, you would now need to find out, because it helps you to locate why it matters. It helps you to locate what we would have done and what we perhaps we need to do. And this is something that Creswell probably puts very well in his writing. When we are looking at the flow of ideas in a problem statement, we are looking at a point where we talk about your topic, it must flow into the research problem. It must flow into the justification of the research problem. You are now into the deficiencies in the evidence, that is previous research. Then you relate the discussion to the audience. So your topic basically covers your subject area. In this example, it's the parents' role in promoting access to college. Then the research problem, you are looking at a concern or an issue. You are looking at the problem. You are looking at something that requires a solution. So in this regard, is the need for better access for students of color. So it would mean that students of color are segregated in terms of how they access college, maybe college facilities and all that. So this is a concern, this is an issue. And when you identify, so I simply going to say students of color need better access, that's not good enough. People need evidence. Why do students of color need access? Why do they need better access? So you should be in a position to find evidence from literature. What happens with students of color? What happens with them in colleges? How are they treated? So there is evidence from the literature. There is evidence even from your practical experience. So your issue here is to just look at the past research that has been documented and see how people of color has been affected. And then you try to justify why this problem needs to be researched at the moment. Then you also look into the deficiencies in that evidence. So the evidence is there to support your problem. But one good thing that you should be able to do is to find out what is the weakness of the current literature. So in that board of evidence, you need to determine what is missing. Perhaps the issue of the students of color has been researched in a small portion of the world. That is what matters. And in that regard, you are now even justifying that we really need this research, because people of color are not only in one space, are not only in the US, for example, they're everywhere. And you are now trying to find out what is the weakness of this. Like, for example, in the study that I was telling you, previous studies, they have simply used students who were visiting countries to determine what they have determined. That becomes a weakness in its own. I am trying to use anyone who is either a student, young or old, in trying to determine a phenomenon and try to understand that. So it's your responsibility to make sure that you identify missing evidence, you identify the weakness of literature. What do we need to know more about people of color? It helps you to come up with a strong research problem. So there is need to evaluate how parents can promote access. That's perhaps the deficiencies one would have identified in this. I'll be able to show you one or two deficiencies when we are in the discussion forum. Then you come to the end where you are now discussing to your audience, how will you address what we need to know about? So how will you address what we need to know? Help researchers, educators, policymakers, and other individuals. Parents can better assess their role. Counselors can involve parents. Colleges can better come up with work. So you can really relate your discussion to anybody. If you have not identified the problem, if you've not justified it, and you have not probably come up with deficiency. Dr. Murray?
Thanks so much, Dr. Warrior, for this. I think you've raised very pertinent issues. I just want to give the same, based on this, these stages that you have just talked about in terms of the flow of ideas. I just want to give an example. For example, again, related to the issue of online teaching that we are talking about. Let's say your topic is around online teaching. And probably the research problem that you found out is that most students actually dropping out as a result of failure to migrate to online teaching. That probably becomes your research problem. And then the justification for such a research problem is that we need to understand that, because evidence from that can actually help universities to come up with better online platforms or better e-learning platforms, and it can actually capacitate government to understand how they can actually come into the picture in assisting. But also, based on literature, you can also begin to tell us what is there in literature, and say, for example, maybe research that has already been done in countries that have migrated from face-to-face to online teaching. These are some of the challenges that are always associated with that. And therefore, it is very important for us here in the Namibian context to understand why is it that people drop out as a result of failure to actually migrate to online teaching. And then in terms of deficiencies in the evidences, probably you can look at the research that is already there, and you can actually see that maybe most of the studies that have been done have actually been done in the US, and most of them have been done in Europe and Australia, and therefore there's nothing that is actually coming from Africa. And because of that, you can begin to shape up your problem statement and demonstrate that your study is very important, because it's actually adding an important layer of knowledge that is not already known, because most of the studies that are already there have been done in contexts where people actually have got more access to these technologies. And generally, even though there are chances that people are also dropping out in those contexts, but the numbers probably are lower than they would be here in Africa, where again issues of lack of access to electricity, lack of access to gadgets, and lack of even the data costs are also extremely high in most cases. So again, if you can demonstrate that, and then you go down to the discussion to audience, then you can then demonstrate why is it that we need to be able to deal and to know about that particular issue? How is it going to help? It can help us as educators, it can help policymakers, it can help the government to be able to shape up in terms of coming up with better e-learning platforms, but also making sure that they also have context-specific e-learning platforms that are not maybe data heavy, so that people don't use a lot of data while trying to access those particular platforms. So at that level, you have demonstrated why your topic, your research problem, the justification for the research problem, and the deficiencies that are coming as a result of lack of studies in that particular area is concerned. So it's always very important that you think about it in a chronological, as we were saying from the start. Research is always very systematic. It's not something that is haphazard. Every piece of the puzzle must be connected to the next. Otherwise, if it's not connected to the next, it doesn't make sense at the end of the day. If it's like you're building a house that doesn't have a foundation, and therefore it may not be able to stand the test of time. Dr. Warren.
Okay, thank you. So then when you have done all that, then I think it's always wise to conclude your statement of the problem with what is the overall aim that you need to look at, what is the aim that you intend to address. So your goal should not be to find a conclusive solution to the problem, but to seek out the reasons behind the problem and propose effective approaches to tackling or understanding it. So it's always a good practice to make sure that you state after discussing all what we are discussing, you need to state the overall purpose of your research, and it must be written in an invitive form. The aim of this study is to determine, the aim of this project is to explore, the aim of this is to investigate. The objectives are the concrete steps that you actually need in order to achieve the aim. Or perhaps if you are writing an article, you can say qualitative methods or quantitative research was used to identify this and that. It's still a way of you summarizing all the issues that you have been trying to do and try to show the reader what's the overall goal that you used, that you did in this study. So these are also other further issues that we felt maybe at this level we need to discuss, and just to throw it out there for you to reflect on this. So after doing all that thing, when you have done that, I think it's also important at this level for people to determine whether the problem should be researched or not. And in this space, I'm talking about, if I need to ask the student or whoever is doing that, can you start the problem? If you cannot start the problem, drop the problem. Think about something else that you can actually study. Do you have access to the research site? Most of the times people do they come up with nice problem statements, but when it comes to data collection, there are so many limitations regarding the issues of data, and then you are stuck. What it means is you've wasted your time and other people's time too. So you need to think about all these things. These are just issues that I think we need to throw in this discussion and see how it can help people. So if you don't have access to the research site, think about a research problem that you think you have got access to it. Do you have the time, resources, skills to carry out the research? Some of the researches, they take time. Like what I'm saying is there is a study started in 2016. The article was published in 2020. So this is just about some good amount of time that you can look at before the study is done and all that. So when doing doctoral studies takes time, minimum of 3 years in some universities, maximum of 6 years. Some people can even go beyond 6 years still doing the PhD. So you need to think about, do you have the time? Do you have the resources? PhDs are even expensive. If you are not funded, you are in some kind of difficult space. You need resources to buy a camera, to hire me as your research assistant, to hire someone who understands better analytic methods and all those kind of things. So you need money. You also need skills. Sometimes when you can outsource someone to do your data analysis, but do you have the skill to analyze the data that you have been given? And you should also ask yourself, should you study the problem? And we need to be sincere. Usually people don't read around too much literature, and at the end of the day, they won't be able to justifiably answer this one. Should you be studying the problem? Sometimes some other problems need not to be studied. We need to take action, especially if they're everyday problems. There's a difference between a research problem and an everyday problem. Hunger is an everyday problem. We don't need to research about hunger. We need to solve hunger. Does it advance knowledge? So if you look at your problem statement, especially at doctoral level, it should be very, very clear that you have got a gap that is strongly identified that you need to fill in. Even those who are writing research articles, it's all about, are we going to be better off after reading this study? Are we going to be better off? Are we going to understand things better if this study goes ahead? So it has to advance knowledge. It has to contribute into practice and all that. And it also needs to fill in a gap. There should be a gap that you should have identified, and that gap should be mentioned. Remember where I was talking about, what was this? The deficiency in the evidence. That is the gap, the deficiency in the evidence. So if you don't have a gap, you have nothing to research about. Go home, sleep, and think about a gap. Go home, read, and find a gap. Will your study replicate a past study but examine different participants? Those other issues are also, they also need to come out, especially when you are looking at deficiencies of existing literature, and see and convince people why there is the need to replicate, because these research participants are crucial in that, and they have not been documented in literature. Will your study extend past research, examine the topic more thoroughly? Is it going to give minorities a voice? Is it going to inform practice and all that? I think I will leave Dr. Mari to talk about the example he has here, and then we open up the forum for discussion.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Warrior. So basically, I have an example here in terms of what one can actually call a problem statement. So I want to start with what is the overriding problem. So for example, let's say I want to look at how do we retain qualified staff in an organization, for example. So probably the overriding problem in that particular context would be about retention. How do you retain qualified members of staff in your particular organization? Do you need to incentivize their stay, or do you need to make sure that you motivate them at the level of self-actualization or something like that? Or probably then the issue probably could be an inability to adapt to change, or maybe you're finding that in your organization there are problems in terms of people being able to adapt to change, or organizational change, or change communication within that particular organization. Or probably it could be about poor working conditions, or even generally there could be inequities or inequalities within that particular organization, or it could be issues related to poor conditions in terms of health and even economics, but it also could be about deficits or lack of evaluation of a program. That could be that overriding problem that is actually you have identified in a particular organization. Or it could actually be conflict in terms of ethics, values, and morals that is probably leading to low staff morale, but also that is also affecting the way how people actually relate to each other in that particular organization. So the issue now is to say, you move from what is the overriding problem to say, where is this particular problem really obtaining? So for example, probably you can find out that probably this particular problem that I'm talking about actually can actually be found in a manufacturing space, or in a manufacturing industry, or in the education sector. It could be health administration, it could be a government problem, it could be societal-wide problem, or it could be corporates within the Namibian context, or it could be NGOs, depending on where. So it's always very important to start from the what to go to the point of where exactly, so that you can be able to say, where can I get my data? So the where part of the problem allows you to know where exactly are you going to find your data. Otherwise, if you don't know where is that problem actually taking place, it becomes very difficult to pin down to say who is going to be part of my sampling, my sample, who is my population, who should I interview, who should I actually survey, so that I can be able to understand what is really happening. And then the next from there, you need to ask yourself, what needs to be done to be able to solve this particular problem? So you're moving from the where you have identified, for example, let's say it's a manufacturing sector where you have found this particular problem that you're talking about. And then from there, you ask yourself, so how do I go about making sure that I get the data that I want to be able to understand this particular problem? That's when you start talking about the research methods that you're going to use. For example, you can say, I probably need to do a survey, I need to do an interview, I need to create a new model if it's a theoretical problem, or I need to determine what experts believe or say, or I need to evaluate, or I need to do a meta-analysis, or I need to conduct an experiment, or I need to do a regional or a sectoral benchmarking exercise, so that I can be able to understand what is really happening within this particular problem. So you start always from the what, you go to the where, and then you ask yourself what needs to be done to solve this particular problem. And that the what needs to be done to solve this problem then allows you to look at the methodology. And that's where what we've been discussing of late has been centering around the methodology. But again, everything starts from the problem statement, as we have rightfully pointed out. You can move on to the next slide. So I just want to read this next slide that we have, the next slide, this one, so that you can see how this particular person actually was able to articulate the research problem based on this particular study. So we are talking about here, Case and Fair 1999, recommend that economics be taught in a way that simulates real world events and situations. Economic textbooks have a reputation for being dull and abstract. Therefore, many educators have relied on supplemental materials, including interactive simulated case studies. One of the more promising genres is Aprilia. However, there is a lack of empirical evidence to determine how effective such applications are with respect to improving the ability of students to solve economic problems and to make sound economic decisions. A quantitative quasi-experimental design study could help elucidate the efficacy of integrating technology into the economic curricula. Half of the participants of this study will utilize Aprilia software, which is the experimental group, and a comparison will be made between the knowledge gained using this software and that gained from the traditional teaching methods, which would be the control group. So basically, if you want to see where exactly how this particular person was able to nail down the research problem is when he or she started talking about however there is a lack of empirical evidence to determine how effective such applications are with respect to improving the ability of students to solve economic problems and to make sound economic decisions. So it's always important to start from mapping out what the literature says, but then you need to be able to identify the gap, to say, yes, all these things have been done. For example, face-to-face teaching has always been there. We have always been using it. But now all of a sudden, because of COVID-19, we're all being forced to start embracing e-learning as part of teaching. So if it is that which you want to study, you need then to be able to demonstrate that there are no empirical studies that have been done to understand how people actually are able to cope with e-learning under conditions of economic stress, of health stress, or where there is a lot of lockdowns, for example, that are going on. So you can actually locate your study within that context to say, my study is very unique in the sense that it's going to look at this particular phenomenon of migrating from face-to-face to online teaching in a context where everyone is under really attack, and also everyone is really in a space in a state of of panic because of the current lockdown measures that are currently happening around us. So it's essentially about making sure that you are able to demonstrate. And then once you are able to demonstrate where the gap is, the next thing is to demonstrate that this particular problem can actually be dealt with by actually using probably a quantitative or a qualitative study to be able to understand better that particular problem that you're talking about. You can move on to the last slide, Dr. Woye. So in a nutshell, in terms of concluding this particular session, what is very important is always to bear in mind that the problem statement does not attempt to define the solution, nor does it outline the methods of arriving at the solution, but it just allows us to know what is the problem. It does not attempt to define the solution, so you should not start talking about the solution there. And neither should you start talking about outlining the methods of arriving at the solution. But what you can only demonstrate to us is what is the problem and why is it important for us to be able to deal with that particular problem. And the other issue that is also very important to understand is that the problem statement is a statement that initiates the process by recognizing the problem. So it allows us to recognize what is the problem at hand. So you can then from there are many ways of going about it in terms of then how do you go about it. For example, you can describe how things should work. For example, you're saying this is a problem, but under normal circumstances, things should be able to do A, B, C, D. And then you can be able, for example, to explain the problem and state why it matters, as we have already pointed out. But it's always very important in research to back up your claims. So don't just make hearsay claims without any evidence, because then you open yourself up to scrutiny. You also open up yourself to many questions from your readers, because they want to understand where are you getting all this knowledge that you're talking about. And we are saying, as part of the whole thesis writing, the issue after you have actually identified the statement of the problem, then as part of doing the research, that's when you can only propose the solution. The solution can only come later after clearly attempting to demonstrate what the problem is all about. But also, you should also be able to explain the benefits of your proposed solution, as we know in terms of research, in terms of recommendations, and then you should be able to conclude and summarize the problem and the solution in terms of what really can actually then be able to work. For example, if you are dealing with e-learning that we're talking about more in depth in this particular session. So with that, I think it's time for us to open up to the question and answer session and see what we can do in terms of understanding this particular problem.
Okay, so I think it has been a marathon and we have been running to finish the presentation and all that. So I think I have received one question here. Let me see. Okay, question. So someone is asking that, can you clarify information for inclusion in the background of the study versus the statement of the problem? Can you clarify information for inclusion in the background of the study versus the problem? Normally, in the background of the problem, there is so much to write in that section because you should be. It's for me. I always tell my students that your background of the study should be, to me, some mean literature review, where you also need to discuss what has led to the problem, is supported by literature, where you need to also show me what is it that we know and that we don't know, precisely for you to identify the gap, and where you also need to have a look briefly around some theories. But having said that, because research has to have some kind of a golden thread, I always want some of the information that has been discussed in the background. They need to come and be highlighted in the problem statement, particularly for the doctoral students, because I would want you to have some small discussion in the problem statement regarding the gap that you would have stated earlier on in the background of study. So there is some overlap that should happen there. It's not like you just have to discuss issues in the background of the study where you are giving us more context in terms of what has led to the problem as supported by literature. What is it that we know? What is it that we should know? I want that portion where you are talking about what is it that we know and what is it that we should know. Of course, it should have come earlier in the background. You need to restate that for me in the problem statement, because it helps us to move further towards other issues that we would have talked about. So there is that kind of discussion that needs to come out. And also you also need to talk about the context in terms of the problem that you would have identified. Much more would not have been covered in the background of the study. I see user, and maybe before I take user and Dr. Mnangatire there, maybe Dr. Mare, you might want to respond to this. Clarify information for inclusion in the background versus the statement of the problem. Oh, okay, or maybe the person wanted to ask it yourself or what. You can go ahead to ask if you want, but Dr. Mari, you can come in and talk this. Then I take Dr. Mnangatire. Was the user's hand up or Dr. Mnangatire? I'm not sure. Dr. Mari?
Okay, so basically when we talk about the background of the study, basically we are saying where is this whole study coming from, and where in terms of the broader, the broader scope of that particular study, where is it located? Where is it coming from? For example, let's say it's e-learning. It must be, you must be able to locate it within the broader ambits of saying, this is what has been happening in terms of e-learning debates, in terms of the background, but maybe in the Namibian context, maybe e-learning is probably informed by the following legislative or statutory regulations, and then demonstrate to the reader exactly where is this whole study coming from. So basic background is pretty much, it's almost like an introduction. It's just about introducing that particular topic to the individual concerned, to say this is where exactly it is coming, and then try where possible just to locate it within the broader debates where actually it's coming from. But beyond that, whereas when we are talking about a research problem, we are saying, for example, we have given an example of, let's say, digital divide as part of the e-learning, to say, as a result of e-learning, all of a sudden, some people can't access e-learning. That is the problem now. That becomes the problem. So when you are looking at that, we are saying you must then be able to demonstrate why is it that the digital divide is a problem that makes it, for example, makes it very difficult, for example, for universities or schools to actually then roll out this remote learning interventions that we are talking about right now. So in that context, you are demonstrating that, yes, this whole problem is located within the broad ambits of e-learning, but the problem that I'm dealing with is to do with so many people dropping out of school or even university as a result of failure to actually migrate from face-to-face to online, because they don't have access to technology, they don't have access to the data that is required to be online, so that they can actually do whatever they want to do online. So in a nutshell, that's essentially what it is all about.
Dr. Mnangatire, please come through. I'm lowering your hand now.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Mare and Dr. Woyo, for your presentation, and thank you for everyone in the audience for the contributions. I would also like to add to that with regard to the background and the problem statement. Pretty much you have highlighted some of the things I wanted to do, and I will not repeat that. But for me, basically, if you follow the Golden Thread subscription, I read your title, I read your introduction, then I read the rest of your background. I pretty much have an idea of what is the problem, why is the problem important, and what exactly are the issues around that problem. Those things should appear in detail in your background. So when I go to your problem statement, it's like now giving me a snapshot of some of the key issues in your background, which you are quickly picking out exactly specifically what is the problem. Because I'm sure when you discuss, like Dr. Mara was talking about the hot debates around a topic, like we talk of hot debates around online learning. Does it work? Does it not work? How best can we implement it? We have a lot of research questions, research problems we can do now around online learning. If it works where and when. Those will come out in your background. But as you close your background, you will narrow down to specifically what you are focusing on. And that leads you into your problem statement. When I read the first 2 lines of your problem statement, they are linked already to how you ended your background. I think that's all I can say.
All right, thank you for that. Precious here, Precious, I don't know where she's calling in from. She is saying that she's a researcher in neoliberal urbanism and gentrification. This sounds good. Specifically the building of commercial and tourism amenities. My problem is when I present, I am told the problem is not clear. My problem statement is that gentrification are taking place rapidly and are going on unchallenged, and the facilities are exclusionary. However, my audience are locals who do not feel that is a problem. Okay. I pick some few issues here. Like what I was saying in the beginning, Precious, if you can't prove there is a problem, then you have the problem. Then you are in a quite difficult situation, because from what you are saying here is whenever you are presenting to the people or whenever you are presenting to the audience, you are constantly being told that your problem is not clear, and your problem statement is gentrification is taking place too rapidly. And do you have the evidence for this, so that the people who are listening to that can follow up on what you are saying? So like I said, you need to have evidence at two levels: evidence in literature, and then the evidence that shows that there is actually a trend where you are saying gentrification is taking place too rapidly, and is going on unchallenged, and the facilities are exclusionary. Who has been excluded? Is there the evidence to show that these people or these stakeholders have actually been excluded? You are saying again, your audience who are locals do not feel that there is a problem. And so it's perhaps, in my thinking, the way this problem is presented. It needs, because if the issue with the problem statement is it has to be presented in such a way that everyone would agree that you have a problem. Everyone would agree that the way in which gentrification is taking place is actually problematic, and we need a scientific solution to it. So if you can't put those things in space, and then it becomes difficult. I'm not a neoliberal researcher myself. I'm just putting out comments based on my experience in other spaces and all that. So Dr. Mare, you can come in here and let's see how far we can try to help Precious here with the neoliberal urbanism and gentrification study.
Okay, so I think the most important thing for here is to demonstrate. Okay, let me go back to the question, because it's saying I'm researching on neoliberal urbanism and gentrification, specifically the building of commercial and tourism amenities. My research problem is when I present, I'm told that the problem is not clear. My problem statement is that gentrification is still taking place rapidly and are going on unchallenged, and the facilities are exclusionary. So I think for me, the most important thing, if you're talking about its exclusion, so demonstrate who is being excluded as a result of gentrification, for example. If are you talking about poor people? Are you talking about the middle class? And what is likely to happen as a result of that exclusion in terms of building inclusive cities? For example, right now we are talking about no one should be left behind. For example, if you're talking about SDGs, for example, SDGs, there's a catchphrase that they use to say no one should be left behind. We must be able to build cohesive, peaceful, but also inclusive cities, for example, is part of. So those things I think are very key in terms of explicating your research problem, so that you can demonstrate why exclusion is a result of this neoliberal, neoliberal gentrification or neoliberal urbanism, where only those who have got access to means of production, or those who have got the financial resources, are the ones that are actually being able to be included in these spaces that are being created as a result of this gentrification process. So you can then be able to demonstrate how gentrification sometimes push out people who don't have the means to be part of that particular spaces that are being created. For example, even in gated communities, for example, if you look at what actually happens as a result of creating gated communities, is that people who don't have access, who cannot be able to build those kinds of gated communities, are usually pushed out to townships or even to informal settlements, because they cannot be part and parcel of that. So at the level of exclusion and inclusion, so your research problem should be able to demonstrate the implications of neoliberalism. We know how neoliberalism works. It's pretty much, it's around those who have access to means of production, and also neoliberalism is also about making sure that, those who can actually be able to pay user fees, or who can be able to pay user fees at the level of, water bills or be it electricity, are the ones that can then be able to become part of that kind of an urban settlement that is being created. So it's always very important that you demonstrate the implications of neoliberalism, but you also then demonstrate the implications of gentrification at the level of inclusion and exclusion, and then clearly demonstrate based on empirical studies that have been done. For example, we know gentrification processes have happened in Brazil. They've also happened in countries like, Kenya. So you need to be able to demonstrate, even in South Africa, for example, right now there's gentrification that is happening in Braamfontein, for example, in South Africa. And then you should be able to demonstrate how those, those exclusions and inclusions actually affects the building of cohesive and also cities that actually are inclusive, so to speak.
Yes, so Albertina, not Albertina, sorry, Precious, you need to give evidence. You need to make sure you supply evidence. And like what Dr. Mari is saying, you also need to demonstrate what will go wrong if this gentrification continue and all that. I think one of the doctors here, Dr. Mnangatre, is saying the same. Supplying evidence to support this will help. What will go wrong if this continues? Thank you, Precious, for coming with that practical question. Yeah, I think it is going to help go and improve what you might need. And we hope after this, when you present it again, it is going to sound different. We hope that. It looks like today there are not many questions. Not many questions on problem statement. So it means many of these people, they know how to write it. Perhaps that is what it means. I think maybe they know how to write it.
Sorry, Dr. Oyo, I have a question.
You are asking me or you want to answer it?
I'm asking a question, I'm not answering any. Right. My question basically is, in my experience, I've come across a different length in terms of a problem statement. Some are literally a paragraph. Some stretch to almost 2 pages. That's the longest I have seen. What matters really in a problem statement, especially when you look at master's level and at PhD level? If I'm writing my proposal for my master's or for my PhD, would length be an issue?
I don't know really, but at doctoral level, you might not be able to demonstrate quite a lot of these, what we were talking about in a paragraph. At master's level, I don't have problems with a paragraph or two because I am training a different kind of candidate. I simply want the student to master the methods of doing research. But at doctoral level, I'm not sure if that's possible, in a paragraph to articulate all the issues we were talking about, justifying the problem, giving me the evidence, going on to show the deficiencies of existing literature and all that. I'm sure it's something that you can do in more than a page. That's my thinking. I think my problem statement was 5 pages, but I don't know. Maybe Dr. Mari, you can come in. But for a master's, I don't mind having it in a paragraph or two. But for a doctoral, I really mind if all the issues that I want in a problem statement are included.
Yeah, I think I concur with what you're saying, Dr. Warren. Essentially, when you're dealing with at master's level, if you put it even in a paragraph or two paragraphs, I think it's sufficient. But at a PhD level, I think it has to go beyond that. At least a page or so will do, if you are able to clearly, highlight exactly what is the research problem that you are dealing with. within a page or even a page and a half, it should be sufficient. But I think for me, at the end of the day, it's not really about the length of the number of pages or the number of paragraphs that you put. It's about how clear your research problem is at the end of the day. As long as it's clear and somebody can be able to read it and be able to understand how we are going to then unpack it and be able to research that. Because remember, at the level of research problem, that's where you can then be able to see where are your research objectives likely to come from, where are your research questions likely to come. As long as it's very clear and and very concise to the reader, then I think it should be able to be fine with anybody.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so Precious is going to present next Friday, which is next week. We wish you all the best, Precious, for your presentation, and let's solve this gentrification problem. I don't know if there are other problems. So yeah, that's for me. So I think for me, as long as the key issues of a problem statement are covered, length might not be an issue. And I think it also depends with the nature of the study you are talking about. Like, for example, in my PhD, I had 2 streams of data that I was handling. So perhaps because I was bringing in a problem from a demand side and I was bringing in a problem from a supply side. So I had two different aspects of issues that I had to put in there and present my case. So perhaps the overall message is the problem statement has to be compelling, more especially for the doctoral students. For the masters, it's a case of you telling me you have this problem, give me some kind of evidence and some little support of the evidence in terms of the theoretical discussion. But for doctoral students, a compelling one is what people are looking at. I have a question on the topic. Can I change my topic if I have already submitted my proposal? It depends with the university. If the topic has been registered by the university, then there's a problem. But if the topic has not been registered by the university, I don't know what the people at the University of Pretoria do, but topics can be changed anytime. I have changed the, what is it called, topics at some point where we think that maybe what the student wants to do is not probably what the topic is talking about. So it depends with the regulations of your university and what do they say. Dr. Mari, what do you have to say?
I think I concur. I think basically as long as it has been registered, it becomes difficult. But generally, some universities are very flexible in the sense that, yes, it may be registered, but again, I think as we all know that sometimes you can run into problems trying to do fieldwork on a particular topic. So all of a sudden, anything that you have already proposed can always be be changed, but it depends with the university. Some universities will allow you to go back to the drawing board and revisit your topic so that it fits what you are likely to face in the field. But some would say, no, you have to start a new project altogether when you do that. But it depends. But I'm of the opinion that universities must be flexible, especially now with COVID, because sometimes you would have probably proposed to do A, B, C, D, but all of a sudden now certain topics probably are not going to be research-wise, it's not going to be feasible to continue with them given the context where we find ourselves in now.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, okay. It's better if I talk so that I can explain my question better. My name is Vivian from South Africa.
All right. Thank you, Vivian. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I've already written my research proposal, and I was busy writing chapter 1 and chapter 2, which is chapter 1, the introduction and the background of the study, and chapter 2, basically the research analysis or the research review that I have read. So when I was taking my chapter 1 and 2 to someone to proofread it, I was told that my research problem is not talking to my topic. I must change my topic. Then I found it very demoralizing because I've already written about, I've already gone through the stages. So I don't know if I can still keep the context of the research and just change the topic.
Okay, thank you
Oh,
for
what is the
that
experience?
submission. What is your advice there, Dr. Mnangatire? What is your advice there, Dr. Mari?
Dr. Mnangatire first, maybe?
Okay, no, it's fine. It would be helpful to have a better understanding of exactly where's the mismatch in terms of what you really did, the information that you wrote in your background, in your proposal, your study objectives, your research questions, and also the literature that you reviewed. Because the changing of the topic, what I don't understand is the changing of the topic simply going to change the title so that it suits what you have done, or it's dumping everything that you have done and starting over? That needs clarity, because sometimes you have a topic that you have, then you wrote something else, but then you realize all you need to do is maybe to change the topic that you have so that it suits the literature you have done, the research objectives that you have done. I'm worried if it sounds like you need to dump everything, because I think it should be some tweaks that you need to do, which somehow should be manageable. Thank you.
Yes, I think I concur again with what Dr. Mnangatire has just said. I think it's not really an issue of throwing the baby with the bathwater. It's an issue simply of making sure that your subsequent sections speak to your topic at the end of the day. The topic that you already have, try as much as possible to make sure that you feed into that, so that people can be able to see the connections that are happening in terms of your research problem, in terms of even the methodology that you're going to do. It must always speak back to the topic. So make sure that rather than changing the topic, I think already probably the topic, we can actually say, is already precasted. So somehow you need to just make sure that you change what you can change, which means changing what is already, the subsequent sections that you're talking about can be changed, but maybe the topic, I think somehow it's a bit late, it's a bit late given that you have already done other stages.
Okay, I hope she's getting some insights. Yeah, because I think there is that discussion that needs to take place whether is it the adjustment of the topic or everything else that has been written needs to go off and all that. So yeah, I think it's now time. Thank you for joining in. It was nice having you on board, and we hope that our research problems are going to be better as we continue writing our studies. I don't know if Dr. Mari, you have anything before we close off the meeting, or Dr. Mnangatire, if you have anything before we close off the meeting.
From my side, basically, I just want to say I think it's been another very engaging session, and I think some people certainly have benefited from this. Going forward, again, we'll continue to find relevant topics that we think are going to help you. But if you have any problems that you think we need to work on, or send any topics that you think are very important that you need us to look at, you are free to let us know in advance so that we can prepare accordingly. So as a panel, we are going to sit down again and look at what we are going to be addressing next week. But otherwise, have a great weekend and see you next Friday.
All right. So precious Dr. Mnangatire.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to ask Dr. Oyo, don't you have a blog where we can follow you, or some kind of platform where sometimes I'm working on something and I get stuck, then I can drop a question, then you can answer at your own time, which I can check, something like that. Because at the moment we just wait until the next day comes. But you know, with research, sometimes Monday, that's when you are fired up, you want to work, but you get stuck, you have nowhere to go, and sometimes that will actually derail your progress.
You can post those questions on the YouTube channel. I'm able to respond many of them there, and you can also get the feedback in real time.
That's great.
Yes. So if you search on the YouTube and you see me there, you just post your questions there, then we make a discussion, or it also informs some of the stuff we might need to come here on the online platform and try to talk about them for the benefit of the audience. So Precious was asking, when do we meet? We meet every Friday unless communicated that we are not meeting. So we meet every Friday at 4 p.m. And then we discuss this. So someone is encouraging Vivian that sometimes it's a matter of wording than actually changing the topic. So if there are some words that needs to be retweaked, Vivian, we hope you're gonna retweak that. We are really against the idea of you throwing out everything that you have done until this point. At proposal level, it's easy because those are a few pages. But if you have gone on to review literature and all that, then I think let's retweak the topic and see. So have a good weekend, everyone. Until we see each other again, stay at home, stay safe. If you have nothing to do in town, stay at home. And if you have something to do, make sure you practice a lot of social distancing and put on a mask. So it's bye-bye for now until we meet again next Friday.